All right, today I am joined by our current reigning world champion, Paulie Aronson. I am so excited to have you.
Howdy.
I'm
Hey
hyped.
guys.
I'm so excited. We're going to talk about everything, just your accomplishments, your testing, your preparation. Before we get started, how does it feel? I already asked you off camera. I want to hear it again. How does it feel so the people can hear as well, being the world champion? And what does it, mean to you being the first American also to do it?
Well, I was just saying before we were talking about, I said, it's
Yeah.
kind of like, it's not too, I don't wake up feeling any different.
Mm-hmm.
I get on DB and play tests with my friends just like we used to. It's just, but I guess the difference is like, I have so many supporters now. I've always had lots of great supporters, but everybody's been like, especially lately, just like I
Mm-hmm.
went to a regional last week and like everybody was like in the room, I think said congratulations at some point or another during the day. And took lots of nice pictures with everybody, and it was fun. Yeah, just stuff like that. There's been tons of support. Everybody's been super sweet in the community.
That's so great.
Yeah.
I mainly wanted to repeat the question because it was so incredible to me when you said, I just went to a regional and I go on DB and I test, and I feel like you're still on your grind. Like the grind just does not stop. Like, what is your I guess thought process, coming off of the win at Worlds and just getting right back to it?
I thought about so I did take like a slight break. Like I took like a
Uh-huh.
2 week break, right? And like I actually up until last week I hadn't played TCG format at all since like basically since our WCQ, which was almost 2 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So like I did in that sense, like because I was testing for Worlds format for a whole month, for 3 weeks basically, and then took a
Mm-hmm.
2 week break. I hadn't really played TCG in a while, so I kind of had to catch up.
Right.
Like at that regional, I was reading the Rescue Ace cards for the first time, like in like mid match. So as I was playing against them, so I took a little bit of a break, but just a couple weeks. Now I definitely want to keep going. Just
Mm-hmm.
because some people keep saying that to me, stuff like, oh, well, now that you won Worlds, like, are you gonna like quit? You did everything you could do, right? I'm like, no, like no,
No,
like
I'm about to go next year.
I think I do have an invite that is
You,
generally the winner
you
gets an
do,
invite back
right?
the following year, so I think I'll
Mm-hmm.
be there. So
That is
that's definitely one of the
amazing.
most fun
Do you
parts.
feel any kind of pressure about going again?
If I do badly, it's like it's Worlds, right? Any
Mm-hmm.
given year,
Of course.
everyone in the room is a great player. So if, no matter how you do, you never know what you're gonna be how it's gonna go. So if I don't do well, I did well this year, which is nice. So I
Mm-hmm.
won't feel bad if I don't do well next year. But certainly, like I'm like super excited to try to do
That's
well again
great.
next year, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
so, I'm definitely like super hyped for Worlds next year.
Also, what were you playing at the regional?
I was playing Pearly just
Oh,
because
okay.
my teammates were very encouraging. They were like they
Mm-hmm.
thought Pearly was probably the best deck right now. I'm not so sure. I think there's like a couple. I think there's like 5 or 6 like good decks right now. I'm not sure
Mm-hmm.
which is the best deck. Um, I'm getting ready now for Vancouver, YCS Vancouver in 2 weeks. So
Right.
today and yesterday I kind of started really grinding hard again, just testing, trying to figure out what I'm going to be playing
Mm-hmm.
in 2 weeks, and not sure. Still not sure, but it'll be interesting. It's gonna be an interesting event because especially like even if we get a ban list and they hit cash, it's gonna be like a wide open format. There's gonna be like so many decks that are viable, and if they don't hit cash,
Mm-hmm.
if there's no list until like after Vancouver, I still think like there's like some of the new decks like Unchained. I was testing versus Unchained earlier with cash, and like I think I went like 0-4 in matches or something like that. So it was
Damn.
actually a pretty bad matchup for cash. So it's like wow, some of these
Damn.
new decks really can compete with Cashier,
Mm-hmm.
which has been the dominant deck for so long. It's gonna
Yeah.
be interesting. Very interesting format.
Are you enjoying the switch from testing for the Worlds format to going back to the TCG? Do you feel like our current format is in a good space, or do you maybe think that the ban list would have to fix a couple things, or are you just I don't know, excited?
I think for so long I've just been feeling like I've been waiting for them to hit to like kill cash for so long. So I'm so tired of this deck, and I think it's definitely
Mm-hmm.
been it's time. It's been time for a
Mm-hmm.
while. But like now with so much new stuff, it's like I don't know if it actually needs to be hit. Like we probably should wait at least one event to see how the format shapes up before we do a list.
Right?
But
Mm-hmm.
but cash has been around for so long, there would be I'm sure if they did just kill it now, no one would be upset. So they could do it either way. But
Yeah, it kind of feels like
we
it
could
just
definitely think
fell
wait one
off
event to see.
gradually. Yeah, like people just kind of don't really care about it that much. They might be a little bored, and also some of the news decks are so cool. I feel like Unchained is
Mm-hmm.
amazing. Rescue Ace just feels like it has
Mm-hmm.
so much potential, and we'll see what happens with it. I guess with the support from Age of Overlord and all of that, and I just feel like it's such a good time to really play the game. I think it's really
100%.
fun. Yeah, like a couple formats were kind of horrible, and I feel like it's just turning for the better, and hopefully it keeps on going like that.
The game's definitely been moving more and more toward like more diverse formats for the last couple of
Right?
years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just like even just more interactive game, more interactive, especially like mirror matches. I think they've intentionally been like doing card design to make like most archetypes have less omni negates than they used to. I
Yes.
think that makes a big
Uh-huh.
difference because like less omni negates naturally makes for like a more interactive game because like now if you're
Mm-hmm.
both playing the same engine, well now whoever's going second can like play too, and you end up with these like super intricate grindy mirror matches like the Despia mirror or the Terra Element mirror or like
Right.
um to extend the cash mirror, another great example. Like in the end, we all kind of concluded going second was literally better in the cash mirror than first. So
Mm-hmm. Yes.
you have definitely like they've been doing a really good job, I think, with card design over the last couple of years. And yeah, definitely also like just there's so many viable decks. Like we're moving towards such like a diverse game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's pretty cool. Definitely like the last couple of years have been a really fun time to play the game, I think.
Oh, I agree. I love that you pointed out the lack of omni negates. I love this as well. And it's also like sometimes a deck will come into the meta where it's like, I don't know, the I guess adventure piles seemed really interesting, and then everyone was kind of like, okay, no way, like this deck just cannot go second. It's kind of weird. And then they don't play it. And immediately we just
Hmm.
stray away from a deck that would inherently like bring omni negates to the game. And I think that's really cool. I think it's much more enjoyable to play it that way. And yeah, I genuinely feel that they are doing a couple things, I guess, right. You know, players are like the player numbers are going up. There's more attendance at events and all of that. But you obviously,
Hmm.
with all of your accomplishments and knowledge and all of that, how would you go about changing the game for the better and bringing more players into it? Because I feel like with Master Duel, a lot of people came in, but not that many probably switched to competitive immediately. So there's kind of a difference there. And yeah, like what's your, I guess, take on
Yeah.
that, seeing as the formats are
Um.
getting a little healthier, but still.
So there's a conundrum in that, which is okay. So before like I answer that, I'm gonna say like just to add on to another reason why I think the game is becoming really healthy and really good is
Mm-hmm.
um in addition to like printing less omni negates, they've also been like just the overall complexity of the card design over the past like 5+ years. It just like every card has like 3 to 4 effects now, whereas years ago every card had like 1 to 2 effects, right? So it's like so that's like another big thing that's like the more effects a card has, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you look at if both cards have if one of your cards and one of your opponent's cards both have like 4 effects, right? That's
Right.
16 total possible interactions between those cards. Whereas if each card has 2 effects, that's
Mm-hmm.
4 total interactions between the cards. So like the more complex they print the cards, like the more interactive the game becomes. That's part of why the game I think in recent years has become so skillful. Like it's so
Mm-hmm.
challenging. Because like I know this is something I've been a big advocate of, like why practice is so important because like the game has reached a point of complexity where you can't just like use theory to just like visualize okay how like a game state's going to go or like this is going to be good against this because just based off of theory because there's so many unforeseen like interactions that there's so many interactions period in like between the decks because
Mm-hmm.
the cards are so complicated with so many effects that like you just can't just like anticipate all of it with just theory. Like that's part of what's made the game so skillful. Like, but here's the flip side. So here's the flip side of that. The
Right.
downside is so the upside is we've gotten to like this really kind of like complex, skillful game.
Mm-hmm.
But the flip side is the barrier to entry for a new player is enormous
Exactly.
because the
Exactly.
harder the game becomes, yeah, it's good for competitive play because it makes in theory we want like right the player who plays better to win, right? We want it to be a skillful
Mm-hmm.
game, but the flip side of that is like the more skillful it is and the more hard it is, the more daunting it's going to feel for a new player, and the harder it is
Yeah.
for going to be for a new player to be able to like get good at the game or even just play the
Mm-hmm.
game. Um, like the rules set for the game is so complicated.
It
Like you need to
is.
know like all the mechanics that have been introduced over the years. Then you need to
Yes.
know all the like all your own card effects and like all the other decks card effects. Like there's so much, and on top of that, then you have the issue of like the game is pretty expensive, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
multiple levels of like there's multiple barriers to entry. There's the complexity. There is the like the just the cost, the sheer like
Yeah.
financial cost to the game. And there's the issue of like the game changes so quickly because they're constantly introducing like new sets and new archetypes like so rapidly compared to other card games. There's just multiple barriers to entry. And like all of that,
Yeah.
so yes, all of that makes for a really, really like challenging, like skillful game
Yes.
that they've kind of like moved us toward. But the flip side is the barrier to entry has become even greater for new players. So it's kind of a choice we're going to have to make, or at least the Konami's going to have to make, which is more like, do you want the perfect game, or do you want a game that's maybe still a good game, but not quite as skillful, but would be maybe easier and more accessible to more players. So the solution would be just lower the complexity of the card design, stop making cards with like 4 effects each, right?
Yes.
That would be the main thing. I think just like simplify the card design. And yeah, I think that would make it easier for players to get into the game. But again, like, do we want to lose what we've been working toward, at least what Konami's been, R&D has been working toward in these recent years? I don't know. It's an interesting question I've thought about a lot. I will say this, a second thing they could do to try to like make the game more accessible, definitely like if they could just help the financial cost, like maybe alter how they do the card rarities, and like maybe make like more good cards, like just like less rare, right? That's like an easy, kind of like what OCG does.
Yes.
From what I understand, in OCG the game's a lot cheaper because of that. So that would be like a big thing. And you could make the argument that the complexity isn't even the main issue, because if that was the main issue, the Master Duel wouldn't be seeing such great numbers in terms of like players, right? So if the question is, well, what's the difference between Master Duel and IRL play? Well, then the biggest difference is just the financial cost. So that would probably be maybe a better area to focus on first. I don't know if they are going to be, if they're necessarily feel incentivized to do that, because the game's certainly still doing pretty well, and I'm sure they're still selling lots of product. But if they want to try to bring more players, and definitely that would be an area to start. Just try to print the card rarities such that the secondary market prices don't end up always being so high. Sorry for rambling.
No, oh my God. You make so many great points, and I'm trying to bounce off of everything that you said, because I agree with pretty much everything of what you said. I think what I liked about Master Duel, for example, is, and I don't play Master Duel, but when I looked into it at the very beginning, I liked the little I guess tutorials that it had. I felt like this was really cool. I thought this was a really cool incentive for like to teach players to play. But then there's this entire like thing of, having a completely different ban list, card pool, and everything else. So that was sort of like a miss for me. Like, I did not personally like that. I completely understand, because it's very hard to like make a game for OCG and TCG players combined. But, Master Duel was such a highly anticipated tool. And I feel like everyone is just like, we love Dueling Book. Obviously, we adore Dueling Book. And when Master Duel was announced, it was like, wow, that's about to be amazing. But then it just kind of like, I feel like they've made a mistake by making it something completely different, because more people could be brought into the game and actually taught something. Like, it's very weird. It's daunting getting into it. So like, I think obviously you gotta love to learn, I think, if you're trying to stay a part of the game. But yeah, I think you threw out some amazing examples of how the game could be made, I guess, more approachable for players. And yeah, I guess, you are someone that has been in the game for quite a while. So obviously you are speaking from experience. I would really want to know like of your beginnings and how you really got into the game and fell in love with it, and sort of like how you went from there and all of your accomplishments and everything that you did.
So I started collecting Yu-Gi-Oh cards as a kid, like 2003, I think. And like, I played like at school with friends, like casually, like we barely even knew the rules. And then like at some point, I think 2006, I went to my first locals, and then my first regionals also in 2006. So that was kind of my like start of playing, like actually playing like competitively, or even like semi-competitively, like.
Yes.
So 2006, and then I went to my first SJC in 2008, which was what YCS used to be called, and got my first invite in 2009, and then kept going around the mid 2010s. Got my first. I took a break from the game for like a year and a half in 2013 because of some health problems. I wasn't able to play for a while, but got back into it mid 2010s. Started getting some ARG tops, which were my first like big event tops. That was like a tour that was big in the US at the time. A lot of like the top players used to fly to them, kind of like YCS's. So I got some ARG tops. Yeah, it was, and that was like a big accomplishment for me. That was like the first thing where I was like, wow, like I was really excited about that. For a long time, I had a lot of food allergies. So if I wanted to travel, I had to bring like all my own. Like I had like a very limited diet, like very limited. So I had to bring like all of my own food for like basically the whole weekend if I wanted to travel. And that was very hard to do on an airplane, to bring like 4 days worth of food.
Yeah.
So for years I never really like flew to events except for like on rare occasion, maybe for like Nats, right, or something. So like for like our WCQ. So finally, like right around when COVID or right before COVID started, I like finally had been going to start. I was booked to fly to Charlotte for the YCS, and then it got canceled, and I was like, oh, well, this sucks. But then they announced Remote Duel, so
yes,
I started doing those. And those were a lot of fun. And then, as some of you guys probably know, I won the last Remote Duel YCS during COVID in 2022 with Base. And that was my first YCS top, technically, which was also my first YCS win.
So wait, how old were you when you got your first invite?
2009, and I was 13. I was 13.
And then you got into, I guess around the 2010s was Edison format, obviously. So did you enjoy that? And are you maybe getting back into that? Like just comparing that to the TCG format right now, it's kind of, it's a big difference.
See, I like this because you've already asked me some different questions that when everyone else had asked me. So no one asked like my thoughts on how can they improve the game, and no one asked me about Edison format.
Oh my god,
but
I'm
I will
so
answer
happy
that
to hear
question.
that. Yes.
No, I think so. I personally don't like to play retro formats.
Oh, okay.
Because I feel like they ruin at least for me personally. Like, it feels like it ruins the nostalgia. Like I know, but a lot of players love them, right? And it brings back nostalgia, and like it's like a lot of people love. I know how much a lot of people love retro formats, but for me, like it just like feels like it ruins the nostalgia. Like, also you pick them up and you're like, what do I do? I barely remember this. Like heck, like oh my god. So you're like, so it's kind of like. I don't know. It's kind of discouraging. You're like, oh, damn, I used to be good at this format, and now I'm like, the main thing is just like, I don't know. Just so there's that, but also like, it just feels like it ruins the nostalgia. I don't know. It's like I want to like have my memories of those formats, like like a time capsule kind of thing. So that's I don't know. That's how I feel. But
that's a very interesting
I think I'm the only one who I've talked to who's like expressed that, but. That's how I feel about it.
I mean, you're the first person that I've heard say that. I hear people say, I don't care about old formats, or I didn't play back then, I'm not interested. Or maybe I played, but I don't want to revisit because I didn't like it. But to be specifically like, okay, I'm just trying to keep this like separated, I think that's very, very interesting. So I guess looking back through all the years, I mean, you did take a break, but other than that, which format did you actually enjoy the most? Looking at everything, I guess, that you went through, if there's something that you can maybe point out.
The early years of the game that I played, like I said, I was young and I wasn't as good as I am now for like anywhere near. So I didn't have as in-depth of a grasp of the formats as I would have now. But I remember, so it just, the game was very different. It was just very different back then. Over the years it's progressed so much. I remember like trying to think. I don't know. I mean, I had fun during like most of the formats the games had. I enjoyed. I can't really think of any that I didn't like. The only one I missed was, like I said, I did take a break at one point, was I missed the Dragon Ruler formats, which I always regretted because those were like, it was such a huge jump in the evolution of the game from like 2012 to like Dragon Rulers in terms of like the ceiling of like what Dragon Rulers could do. It was unprecedented at the time, and I always regretted that I missed that format because I loved Tier 0 formats. My favorite formats are like one deck format. I think Tournament was definitely the best, probably the most skillful and the best format we've ever had. But I know a lot of casual players who weren't playing Tier didn't enjoy it for obvious reasons. So,
yes.
They had to end it. But
R.I.P.
I think some of my favorites were like, let me think. I liked Zodiac format a lot because it reminded me a lot of like classic Yu-Gi-Oh, but like brought into like with like more pluses because it was like brought into modern Yu-Gi-Oh, but it kind of had like very like, classic gameplay style feel to it. Like it was kind of very control-y, a lot of non-engine cards. I liked a lot of the formats. I don't know. Striker was one of my favorite decks of all time.
Oh, nice.
Right? Love Ray. Everyone loves Ray. Striker was awesome. I can't think of some of my favorite formats right now.
Did you enjoy the Tier 0 Spiral format?
I liked that format too. So I mean,
okay.
The Tier 0 part only lasted for like 3 weeks, and then they like did an emergency limit. But I enjoyed that. Even like after the limits, it was still like the dominant deck. I enjoyed that format a lot. That was a good one. I enjoyed. I don't know. I'm trying to think. Like, there have been so many cool formats over the years. Striker definitely stands out to me. Goki was like not one of my favorites, but Goki always stands out as like, you know, it was like the highest ceiling probably. I think
Yes.
probably the highest ceiling combo deck we've ever had. So that was like an interesting one.
Dude, I have the funniest Goki stories. So I started like learning
Yeah.
some of the combo decks around the Goki time. And I remember practicing the combos and then like going to some locals. I did the combos so many times, I got a blister on my hands. And I was like, that is wild. I just comboed with Goki so many times. I had an actual blister. I was like, you know, my palm kind of hurts. That's not cool.
Oh my gosh, I've always worried that would happen, but that's never happened to me. I guess I play so much on my phone on DB. I guess that wouldn't happen to me. I did remember another one of my favorite. I remember it now. I had to think back for years, but I think one of my favorite decks of all time, one of my favorite matchups of all time, was the Domain Monarch mirror match. That was a very fun one.
Interesting.
It was almost universally hated at the time by everybody because it was gruelingly grindy, and it was like one of those mirrors where like you're both like there's almost no way to like gain a like large swing and advantage. So you just had to keep grinding with like minor interactions like over and over. Like it was just like this a perfectly matched like mirror match where it was just like a war of attrition, and like there were very, very few swingy cards in the front, except for like Fog King, where you could just like floodgate out your opponent, but like it wasn't that popular. So like it was just like super grindy, and the games were super long, and it was very fun. I love mirror matches like that. So
do you like mirror matches like overall?
Definitely mirror matches. I think in general mirror matches are the most skillful form of Yu-Gi-Oh, because you know you're playing the same deck. You both have should have a really in-depth understanding of it. There's like I feel like it generally ends up being where like just like mirrors inherently tend to be pretty evenly matched. That was not a pun. Okay. And like. Whereas, like, when you're playing two different decks, sometimes, like, the cards aren't always going to interact well. So, like, sometimes one deck's just going to blow out the other. Or, like, one deck's just going to have, like, a naturally bad matchup or a good matchup. Whereas, like, in a mirror, like, it's inherently 50-50, right? And it comes down to skill. So, and especially when it's, like, a mirror of, like, the best deck, then, like, you've both probably built your deck to beat the mirror. And, like, so there's the whole, like, deck building becomes really big in mirror matches when you're talking about like the best deck, and just like there's a whole bunch of like dynamics that go into it. So definitely like in general mirror matches are really good Yu-Gi-Oh.
I think it's also cool like in tier 0 formats, like people say, okay, every single deck list looks the same, which to an extent is true, but you're still trying to beat the mirror match. So it's like I think there's so many I guess intricate things that you can do, and I think it's so interesting to kind of study that type of format. And a lot of times people will just mindlessly hate on those types of formats, just like the tier format was.
Yeah, and especially Terror was like the mirrors were so complicated because you had these chain links with like so many effects revolving at the same time.
Yes.
And so much stuff triggering, so much going on at the same time. It was like very, very like it was so skillful. It was like, and so like even deck building wasn't even like you could even argue that deck building maybe wasn't as important in the Terror mirror as it was for like other historical tier 0 mirrors, but it just the gameplay was so good in Terror format. It was probably time for there definitely would have come a time where it was time for it to go. I would have liked to see maybe last for a couple more months, but especially because they introduced Terralment Kashtira, the new card at the very end, so that changed the deck up a little bit. I would have liked if we had at least a month or maybe a month, let's say, with that. But I understand a lot of people were not fans of that format for understandable reasons, so. It was time.
So I guess talking about, tier 0, I guess some people hate it. They say it's toxic. How are you, like, what's your take on some of the cards that are also considered toxic from people? Like right now, there's a bunch of talk about Debarrier, Eradicator, Gimmick Puppet, all of these cards, like everyone's like, ban it, ban a Rise card because it's a Floodgate, like ban everything. Like, what's your take on, I guess, Floodgates in the game?
Floodgates in general, I think are pretty unhealthy for the game. I think I definitely like in a perfect world I would like to see most floodgates banned, right? I think that's I think like personally I don't like to play them just because I actually don't think they're that good. They're very volatile because like cards like Summon Limit, Anti-Spell Fragrance, there's gonna be some percentage of games where you end up stuck under your own floodgate, and now both players are stuck under it, and but you're the one who activated it, so now you're down a card, and like they just can backfire so easily. So like I don't usually lean toward them in like building my sides or whatever. But I do think like a lot of people do play them. And yeah, I just think they're very unhealthy because, when they are paired with like a successfully built board, right? Or like if you resolve a full combo and you put like a floodgate behind it, like everyone has no chance to beat that. So I think floodgates, like they're very volatile. They're just they're too, yeah, and they they reduce interaction in the game, and I think in a perfect world I would like to see cards like that mostly banned. I think lingering floodgates are even worse. So cards like barrier,
Yeah.
probably D-shifter, because at least regular floodgates, at least like they have that potential to end up like backfiring where like now you're both playing under it. Whereas like cards like D-barrier, it only lasts for one turn, so it only affects basically like on your opponent's turn, and now like and there's no way to interact with it because you can at least Cosmic Cyclone like
That's
a fragrance or something. You
that's one
can't
of the
Cosmic
main issues,
Cyclone a D
probably.
barrier.
Yeah.
The only ways to interact with it was like, I mean, one of the best ways was Red Reboot, and that's banned now. So I just think it's kind of like only Crossout Designator. So I think the barrier is my number one card I would like to see banned. Uh, yeah. But that's kind of how I feel about that. Floodgates definitely are not. They're definitely unhealthy for. They're definitely unhealthy for the game, but they probably don't need to be banned because, like I said, they are sort of inherently balanced because of the issue of like they can backfire. So they, but in a perfect world, I'd like to probably see them banned, but they don't need to be banned. Barrier is like one of the more pressing cards I would like to, I think needs to go. And Arise Art's not inherently like overpowered. It's because it is an engine card that you have to build, you have to like make. But it's definitely like the deck itself has just been dominant for too long to where I think it's time for it to go. So I would definitely like to see Arise Heart banned. And I think, yeah, those are like the two main cards I'd like to see go. I'd like to see maybe Shifter go to 2. Tactics probably at some point is going to need to be dealt with, probably to 1. And yeah.
How would you approach? What would your I guess approach be to hitting decks? For example, Kashtira is a great example. Do you think the best way to go about it is like, I don't know, banning Arise Heart or banning Fenrir or something that's like a big issue, or would you go for consistency hits? I think that's a good I guess discussion to have. Like, what's your take on hitting decks?
I mean, I'm from back, in the day when like they would hit decks by just like banning their best card or like limiting their best card. So like I was always used to that, and definitely like now they've moved toward, they do more and more so consistency hits most of the time, which is probably a better route overall because that way like it leaves decks still playable. So fans of those decks can still play them without having and still have them be semi-competitive. So I think consistency hits is definitely like the better solution. But definitely like they need to do hard enough consistency hits that the decks, like if they're trying to hit a deck, they need to actually hit it hard enough that it's not still the best deck. Like with Cash, in May they hit it for consistency, and then it was still the best deck. And I feel like as soon as I saw the list, I was like, oh, this Cash is just the best deck still. So I feel like that should have been easier to anticipate and prevent by hitting them a little harder. But no, I think consistency hits are definitely a good way to go. Just like it just needs to be done firmly enough that it is effective. So
yeah, I think that's a good.
At this point, though, I'm so sick and tired of Kashtira. I just want them to ban Arise Heart. So that's personal bias.
Of course, there's gotta be some personal bias in there as well. 100%. So. Yeah, okay, moving on along to your, I guess, on your road of playing Yu-Gi-Oh, of course, we got to your remote YCS win. Amazing. What's your take on some people devaluing those kinds of accomplishments? Remote duel stuff, also being successful on DB, someone such as yourself knows a lot about that, just using DB as a tool and being successful there. What's your take? What do you have to say to everyone doubting the players that do well at these types of events?
So regarding remote duels, I think I definitely understand why there were some players who just weren't fans of playing remote, right? So that's understandable. So like definitely there was at the time there were some players who weren't playing, so that's why some people feel do they count as much because was the full competitive community playing at that time? That's like the biggest reason I see why you could make an argument that they shouldn't count as much. But I think at least 80% of the competitive community was still playing at the time. Jesse was not. That's like a good example of a player who's a great player who was not playing. But even he like later on, like the one Christian one, the last remote YCS like less than a year ago, like even Jesse played in that one. So but the one I won was also smaller just in terms of overall attendance. It was like 600 players. So it was a smaller event. I mean that's comparable to like YCS Niagara. I think in 2019 had like 600, 700. So like It's not that there hasn't been YCSs of that size, but it definitely was on the smaller side. But then the remote YCS, the pack one, the first one, had 2,000 players. It was like a 12-round event. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. Overall, I think, to me, I mean, perhaps I'm biased, right? Because I won one, but like I definitely feel that they count. There's always going to be like, if you look at like, all right, comparing all YSS, it's like, all right, some are bigger than others. There's, you have 3v3s versus 1v1s. You have remote versus in person. You have different continents. Some people argue that, oh, like certain ones from like Latin America, have that they have smaller tendons. It's different competitive environments. So those, shouldn't count as much, or like, this one should count more because it was like this or that. Like,
yeah.
There's always going to be arguments you could make and counter arguments and debate over it, but like,
man, honestly, yeah, I think that's just cringe. Overall, it's like, yeah.
I think, I don't know. Again, maybe I'm biased, but I don't like to like split hairs like that. And I think, YCS is a YCS. So
and, I agree 100%. It is cringe to devalue someone. Like, they literally did it. Do not take it away from them. That's just a lame thing to do overall. So.
And also, I've played in remote YCSs, and as I said, like, and from my experience, like, especially like the last two, even though they had less players, like, were some of the most competitive events like I played in, because all the competitive players played in them, because you play from your home. Like they were actually like the one Christian one I think was one of the hardest ones, and the recent one also, like it was I think the smallest remote YCS, but like there were so many competitive players in it. And then I played in 3v3s, I played in 1v1s. I think 3v3s are really hard in their own right for like different reasons. So I've been to South American events, and I think though people say like, oh, like this con is harder than this one or that one, but like there's great players in every region, and there's tons of people who love the game and compete in every region. So like I said, I think YCS is a YCS, and
100%.
My take on it, but
I agree 100%. And I guess moving on to DV as well. I think DV is great.
My favorite topic.
Yay! Let's talk about DV. An amazing tool, honestly. Yes. So I guess I'm gonna just leave it up to you. Why do you love DV so much?
I consider DB a uniquely valuable tool for competitive players. The fact that you have access to the entire card pool, without a financial barrier, right? It's free. So you can try, like you can literally change decks like instantaneously. Like you can change, like you can swap cards. Like you can like it's so efficient, like to test decks, cards, like anything. Like just having access to the whole card pool like that is something that like we've never before, or I mean that like you can't match with in-person cards, right? I mean you can like proxy stuff, but like even that's like somewhat more time consuming. It's difficult. Like just having access to the whole card pool and being able to test so many things is great. And second, like just having access to like so many other great players from around the world, because there's so many competitive players, especially in Europe. I think there's like a huge concentration of like really like competitive players who love DB and grind DB. Yeah. So like just having access to be able to test against great players like in the rated pool, and like another huge point, just the fact that it's a manual simulator as opposed to some of the automated simulators like Omega or YGO Pro. And I think some of those have manual modes too now, from what I've heard, but I'm not sure. I don't think they're as popular. But just like because it's manual, like the ability to, because when you're testing, like a huge part of it is being able to like go back and like try different things and like oh shoot, like you know what, like if you're playing with your friend, you're like, I think if you had done this, I wouldn't be able to do this. Like I think you might have misplayed. Let's go back and try that line. Or like actually, what if I try this combo instead of this combo? Like just being able to try different things and like go back and experiment and like collaborate with your testing partner. It's just which you just can't do in automated simulator, where you can't go back, and you can't do locals when you're playing on a clock and you're playing a tournament. You can't do stuff like that and go back and try different things. So just like being able to do that, I think, is such an important part of like playtesting and like preparing for events. So yeah, there's just a couple reasons why. I think DB. I love DB. I do the majority of my testing on DB. I always say all this, whenever I talk to people, but I can't overstate how much I think DB is valuable.
That's great. Yeah, no, DB is genuinely,
I feel like I'm rambling a lot
an
tonight.
Amazing tool. No, I think it's great. You are literally giving the people tons of invaluable information. So I think everyone listening in is very grateful. And if you guys are still listening to at this point, make sure to like it. Make sure to let us know in the comments what you, I guess, found most interesting in this video so far. Yeah, DB is actually amazing, and I really dislike how a lot of times people will like devalue DB and just be like, oh, you know, people are toxic on there, I don't want to do this, and I don't want to like get into, I guess, some disputes and the judge calls and all of that. But it just takes away from like you literally being able to go to your computer and whatever time of day just find someone to test with. There's always gonna be someone paired up with you in the pool, you know, wherever you are in the world. It's like, I think that's great. And also,
yeah, and like a lot of what I'm referring to, like with, you know, being able to collaborate and like go back and experiment with things, is referring to like, you know, testing in a room with a friend in unrated. Like, I'm not referring to like playing in rated, but even just playing in rated, like
100%,
but playing in rated is also, like you said, it's super valuable. And like I was saying before, like to be able to get paired against like great players from around the world, like that's also like super useful.
Like, of course, getting together with someone, but like just being able to, if for example, like some of the players maybe listening in might don't have a testing group yet or a testing partner, and it's just very valuable for them to like be able to throw themselves into rated and pretend to play out a regional or something. Okay, I'm going to play out a couple rounds and see how I would do if this was a regional, for example, just pretending. I think that's great. Solo mode, and then of course being able to test with someone. So yeah, naturally, we talked about like, you know, testing with a group of people. And I do think that rated is very, very valuable, as well as being able to go into solo mode. But what kind of person are you when it comes to testing? More of a loner in solo mode, or trying to play with a certain amount of people, maybe your specific like testing group, or what do you like to do?